what would enforceable ESC rights mean in practice? And the chair is Dean Houghton. He's Assistant Professor of Law at UCD. He was academic advisor on ESC rights of the Constitutional Convention, so he's very well versed on the subject that has come up already today. Our panel consists of Siobhan Curry, from the Roma Project Coordinator with Paddy Point Traveller and Roma Centre. He previously worked with Amnesty International on gender-based issues. Owen Carroll, who's Social Policy and Communications Coordinator at the Jesuit Centre for Faith and Justice. Austin O'Carroll is a GP in Dublin in the inner city. He works extensively on developing services for marginalised people and is no mean sailor. And finally, Debbie Mulhall is a community activist in Dolphin House housing complex in Dublin City and has been centrally involved in the collective complaint under the European Social Charter. So there's a real practical experience coming through at this time. Liam has to be gone by 2:15. Students are waiting eagerly for his lectures, so we'll probably speed up the process. Thank you.
Thanks very much for the introduction. Thanks to Maeve and everyone at the Economic, Social and Cultural Rights Initiative for organising this conference. As the speakers have already been introduced, I'll just refer you to their biographies within the conference pack. And before going to each speaker who have been told they have to stick to 10 minutes, I do need to teach in UCD at 3 o'clock. So we will be keeping this very much in time. Maybe just some very brief reflections from me on the Constitutional Convention, where I acted as an academic advisor to the members of the Constitutional Convention to socio-economic and cultural rights and their constitutional protection. Post the recommendation of the Constitutional Convention to place or have some recognition of socio-economic and cultural rights within the Irish Constitution, there has not, as been mentioned already by a number of speakers in the other panel, there hasn't been much movement on that, with the exception of Thomas Pringle, a TD, who has attempted to debate a constitutional amendment on socio-economic and cultural rights. Unfortunately, the government parties have actually voted down that bill, voted down the opportunity of citizens of Ireland to have their say on whether to recognise some sort of socio-economic and cultural rights within our constitution. So this timely panel, I think, on what would enforceable economic, social and cultural rights mean in practice, might, I hope, add further to those calls for recognition of economic, social and cultural rights, in particular for those within vulnerable communities. The panelists are going to speak. They've been all provided with a number, 7 or 8 questions in some cases, which they have 10 minutes to address, and they'll probably address only some of the questions that they've been said. But in essence, what the panelists are going to deal with is to speak about the right to culture, the right to health, the right to housing, and maybe to give us some insights into how ESC rights would serve to protect vulnerable groups within Irish society, including those who are homeless, those who are children, those who are members of our traveller community, and those experiencing poverty more broadly. And the panellists want to look at what would the protection of social, economic and cultural rights mean in practice. So without further ado, I'll ask Siobhan Curran to maybe give her 10-minute contribution. Siobhan, who is as I look at my notes, John is a Calvin Point Traveller and Roma Centre for Siobhan's reflection.
Thanks, Liam. I'd just like to start by echoing Anastasia and acknowledging the recognition of traveller ethnicity. Finally, I think it's a great moment in Ireland, I think a proud moment for Ireland, and I hope a new era of respect for travellers in Irish policy making and legislation will now ensue. If we look at how travellers and Roma are faring across ESC rights in Ireland, I think the experience has been one of systematic violations across a range of ESC rights, from the right to health, accommodation, education, culture and life. And I suppose the central point that I would like to make today and to raise is the issue around government decision making on prioritisation or lack of prioritisation of particular groups. And despite the evidence, despite the serious human rights issues, the government does not adopt a human rights-based approach in relation to travellers in Roma. And I think the hope would be that enshrining rights in the Constitution could play a role in shifting the decision-making process, in shifting the lens through which decisions are made. So one that would prioritise the rights of the most vulnerable, that would ensure that rights are progressively realised, that would ensure that regression doesn't happen, and that would ensure that people don't face discrimination based on ethnicity or any other factors. And I think this is in real contrast to the reality of today and what's actually happening. So just to give a couple of examples, in the area of traveller education, the statistics show that 13% of travellers complete secondary education in comparison to 92% of the general population, and 1% of travellers are in third level education. So we know there's poorer outcomes for travellers within our education system, yet in budget 2011, traveller education supports were cut by 86.6%. So why was that decision made? Likewise in accommodation, traveller accommodation over the period of 2008-2013 was cut by 90%. And I think it's not just about the cuts, we've also seen underspend of allocated budgets. So in accommodation, 36% underspend of a budget that was already cut by 90%, in health an underspend of 18%. And I suppose the point that I'm making is that this was regression. You see budgets being slashed, and the committee itself says that even in severe resource constrained states are obliged to protect the most disadvantaged, and this is what they should have done in relation to travellers in Ireland, and instead they disproportionately cut traveller services and programmes. I think the underspend, it's not just about resources, it's also about a level of dysfunction that underspend represents. There is a lack of implementation of policy. There are things, for example, the recommendations for the traveller education strategy was published in 2006. 11 years later, most of it has not been implemented. Actually, parts that were implemented were dismantled under austerity. The lack of implementation of policy and the lack of accountability in relation to travellers and traveller ESC rights in Ireland is astounding, and this hopefully is something that constitutionalisation could add a level of accountability when there is clear failure to deliver. In relation to Roma in Ireland, there's I suppose a major policy vacuum and a complete reluctance by the state to address the structural issues that Roma face and that push them to the margins. I don't know if people saw last week in Naas the story of Roma living in a warehouse with absolutely no facilities, no electricity, no gas, etc. And I suppose just to say it's not a shocking incident, it's not isolated, and we're hearing stories like this all the time. And I suppose the key issue in relation to Roma that we would see impacting them is the Freedom of Movement Directive. And without going into it, because I don't have time, but the impact of the Freedom of Movement Directive on Roma basically means a lot of people who come here, if they don't find employment, they end up living in dire circumstances. And the problem we have in talking to the Irish state around this is that what they are saying is, well, we're treating everybody equally. Every migrant who comes to this state has the same opportunities. And the point we make is, well, Roma have endured a history of discrimination, a legacy of segregated education, refusal to educate in some countries. This is not equal, an understanding of substantive discrimination is needed and intersectional discrimination. So in a very quick sum up, and it's a little hard to get all the points across, but I think no one is saying constitutionalisation is a magic answer. What we're saying is that it could provide more accountability, And what we're saying is that it would place more pressure on duty bearers, and hopefully an understanding on the part of the government that they are duty bearers and what that duty entails, particularly a substantive understanding of non-discrimination. Thank you.
Systems, processes, policy and policy follow-through, something that the first panel had mentioned, as well as non-prioritisation, something that Tony brought to this conversation, non-prioritisation of significant systematic and systemic discriminations against our vulnerable ethnic minority within our country. We'll now move on to Owen Carroll, Owen, who's Social Policy and Communications Coordinator at the Jesuit Centre for Faith and Justice.
Great, thank you, Liam. And today I very much want to speak about why economic, cultural and social rights are needed and the impact that they would have. For 25 years, the Centre for Faith and Justice and individual Jesuits, including Peter McVerry, have argued that housing should be people-centred in its development, which prioritises the need of the most vulnerable and marginalised, and is built upon the principles of dignity, rights and social justice. The International Covenant on Economic and Social and Cultural Rights, through Article 11, guarantees the right to housing as part of the right to an adequate standard of living. In 1991, the committee spelled this out. The right to housing should not be interpreted in a narrow or restrictive sense, which equates it with, for example, the shelter provided by merely having a roof over one's head. Rather, it should be seen as a right to live somewhere in security, peace and dignity. He also emphasised the centrality that the human right to adequate housing is of central importance for the enjoyment of economic, social and cultural rights. Unfortunately, in Ireland, while we've ratified the Convention, in effect, it is treated as a moral obligation. Likewise, in relation to the Constitutional Convention, while there was 84% in favour of bringing it to a referendum, we have not heard, the committee have not had time to debate it. At a policy level, Rebuilding Ireland, our policy document in relation to housing, has skillfully avoided the rights language. The right to adequate housing is an immediate need in Ireland. Figures from the Department of Housing published last week show that there were 7,421 children, women and men homeless, 7,421 living in hotels, B&Bs and hostels. This figure is made up of 1,239 families. The number of families homeless has more than doubled in 18 months. In August 2015, there were 607 families homeless. For those at risk of homelessness, it is difficult to quantify. The most common reason is low income and unemployment, essentially being priced out of housing. Nationally, Housing Needs Assessment for 2016 shows that 91,600 households are on the local authority housing waiting list. What has been the recent response? Last week, Minister Coveney announced that 650 housing units were built in 2016 by local authority and voluntary and cooperative housing. 14,282 private housing units were also built. The government's plan is to build 25,000 houses per year, while others have indicated between 40,000 and 50,000 are needed. The impact for people experiencing homelessness of not having a right to adequate housing is very real. Talking to people experiencing homelessness, you realise that many feel like they belong nowhere, are in despair, are isolated. They're anxious about which hostel they'll be placed in, whether it's safe. Frightened, threatened about having to share rooms with strangers. Being told that you cannot use the main entrance to a hotel, that you have to use the side entrance. Being told that you cannot have friends. Being told that you're under curfew, having no privacy. Being told by Gardaí to move on. What would be the impact of an enforceable right to adequate housing for people experiencing homelessness? I want to make 4 points. Number one, people experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness would be the number one priority. The UN Special Rapporteur on Housing, Leilani Lani Farah has said that homelessness is an extreme violation of the right to adequate housing. It is therefore, if there were enforceable rights, simply put, people experiencing homelessness would be the priority. It would oblige the legislator and executive to define housing needs and standards, to develop necessary policies, and as per Article 2, provide a timetable for the progressive realisation of these rights. Obligations under Article 2 and Article 11 would require Ireland, as a developed country with greater means and higher living standards, to provide a right to adequate housing in line with the national norms. For those at risk of homelessness, the Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights in 2009 emphasised that Article 11 of the Covenant protects people against eviction into homelessness. Number 2, a shift away from managing homelessness to providing adequate housing. An enforceable right to housing will create a shift away from charity towards social justice and redistribution, a shift from managing homelessness to providing housing. Over Christmas, our good news stories were the opening of homeless hostels. Since December, 238 new emergency beds have been made available. This is not solving homelessness. Opening hostels is not a sign of progress. This is managing a problem. Politically, and regularly presented in the media, homelessness is portrayed as a complex problem, that there are a group of people distinct from you and I that have complex needs, personal needs, that essentially the problem lies with the individual, and we need to fix the individual. This could not be further from the truth. What we know, the overwhelming number of people experiencing homelessness is because they have been economically excluded from housing. Their need is simple, a place to live. For the relatively few who need additional support, a right to housing would see an end to flawed, and I quote, or I put inverted commas on, pathways out of homelessness, emergency hostels, transitional housing, replaced with a housing first model where people are placed in their own house, apartment or flat with security of tenure, and where necessary, individual supports are provided. Number 3, an enforceable right to housing would allow for a realisation of all other rights. The right to housing is interdependent with other rights. The lived reality of people experiencing homelessness is that they are not just excluded from enjoying the right to adequate housing, but many other rights, including the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 3, the right to life, understood as the right to enjoy life, the right to feel safe, the right to work, to education, to a relationship, the right to be free from discrimination and stigma. Lastly, number 4, in realising rights to adequate housing, we need an ideological shift where housing is seen as a social function rather than commodity. Enforcing the right to adequate housing will go some way towards this. For me, this is the complex and difficult challenge. The UN Special Rapporteur on Right to Adequate Housing highlights that homelessness occurs when housing is treated as a commodity rather than a human right, essentially a structural failure. Housing, Farah points out, has increasingly become a commodity whereby, quote, capital investment in housing increasingly disconnects housing from its social function of providing a place to live in security and dignity, and hence undermines the realisation of housing as a human right. Markets are oblivious to people and communities in the role of housing and the role housing plays in their well-being. Worryingly, housing and commercial real estate have become the commodity of choice. The current value of global real estate is about $217 trillion US, 60% of the value of all global assets. Residential real estate comprises 75% of this total. The UN Special Rapporteur on Housing has said that governments are too deferential to the markets, that states need to emphasise the social function of housing over anything else. I'm drawn towards a quote by a gentleman called Amory Lovins, an American scientist, that said, "The markets make a good servant but a bad master." For me, this is our biggest challenge, to challenge the purpose of housing. We as a society need to value housing as providing a social function for all, including those experiencing homelessness. And as an enforceable human right. Thank you.
As with Siobhan's presentation, Owen's presentation has once again spoke about systems, processes, structures, and Owen told us, and many in this room will be familiar with the horrific statistics on homelessness that has developed. And when he spoke about markets, let's just remember how willfully the Irish government demanded that we all take on the burdens imposed by Utopia, yet how reluctant they are to ensure the compliance with our other international human rights obligations under ICESCR. Another part of Owen's presentation I found fascinating was that sense of control, controlling when you can come, what door you enter. It reminds me of a system that we've had in existence in this country for the last 17 years, that system of direct provision for asylum seekers, that nascent form of how do we control those that we do not simply like as a society. Our next speaker, Dr. Austin O'Carroll, GP, Olympian, is now going to speak on health inequalities and issues related to health. Austin.
Thanks very much. I didn't win the Olympics for GP, by the way. We are a knowledge society. We know a lot of things. We know Article 12 of the International Covenant on the Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, which says that everyone has the right to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health. We know the difference between health inequities and health inequalities. It is okay if we have unequal health. A 70-year-old has unequal health compared to a 30-year-old. It is not okay for a person who comes from Ballymun to have a different health to a person who comes from Killarney because of where they come from. That is a health inequity. We know many things. We know people from areas of deprivation have a worse life expectancy, between 6 to 8 years, depending whether you're a man or woman. We know that if it has been estimated that we could have saved 13.5 million extra years of life in Ireland if we addressed health inequities. We know child mortality, infant mortality, neonatal mortality, sudden infant death syndrome, much higher rates among people in areas of deprivation. We know that people in areas of deprivation have much worse disease profiles, and as well as having shorter lifespans, they have spent 10 years extra in ill health. We know that the actual spectrum of disease crosses not just the behavioural issues, it crosses every single type of disease you can think of. Cancer is twice as high, circulatory disease is 1.5 times as high, injuries of poison 1.5 times as high, respiratory disease twice as high. We know that people in areas of deprivation have poor mental health problems. We know that on the edge of poverty is homelessness, drug abuse, travellers and marginalised. And that edge, as Alice Story calls it, is a cliff edge, where the statistics plummet. We know that for a homeless rough sleeper, the life expectancy in Ireland is 38 years if you're a woman and 44 years if you're a man. We know that the health of homeless people is terrible. 1 in 20 is HIV, 1 in 3 hepatitis C, just 2 statistics. We know that 1 in 3 have attempted suicide. We know that travellers have 10 years less life expectancy. We know that health for ethnic minorities is worse. We know all these things. So what about the services? What do we know about the services? Well, we all know Tudor Hart's inverse care law. And the inverse care law says that the provision of services is inversely proportional to the need for services. And more simply put, those with the most needed services are least likely to get them. We know that's for the secondary care level. We know that if you need to get a treatment for a service and you go privately, you'll get it within weeks. You know the same service will take months to years in the public health system. We know that, I can give you a wide range of statistics, but I'm not going to go into it, but we know this. What we don't actually know from research is whether this causes death. But the reality is we do know this results in extra death because it makes sense and we know that is what is actually the truth. Those people die because of those differences in time access. We know that the funding for hospitals in areas of deprivation, despite them having to deal with much more illness burdens, is the same as from those well-off areas. We know that in areas of deprivation, the GP to patient ratio is 1 to 2,500 compared to the national average of 1 to 1,600. We know that even in those areas, despite that poor GP patient ratio, that most GPs in areas of deprivation, nationally 1/4 of GPs have their lists closed because they're too busy. In areas of deprivation, 1/3 have them closed. So we know all these things. We know also that access for marginalised populations, despite them being over the cliff edge, is also very poor. No one's looking over or sending down services down to the bottom of the cliff edge. So, why do we need a right for health, or equitable health? I think we have the knowledge as to why we need a right to health. Now, I think it's important to understand, what do we mean by having a right to health? And there's an interesting analysis by Levitas on the way different countries approach health. And she'd identified 3 different discourses. The first discourse is the underclass discourse, and it's the actual discourse you find in America. And actually, if you look at the American dream, it actually captures the discourse. Because the American dream says, anyone can become the president of the United States, anyone can become a millionaire. And the corollary of that is, if you don't become the president or you don't become a millionaire, it's your own fault. So basically, it is your own fault if you end up in the underclass, and that's your tough luck. And there are 2 approaches to people whose fault it is. The first approach is, I'm not paying for those lazy people which you often hear Americans talk about during elections. And the second approach is the more Christian, charitable approach. That is, we feel sorry for those poor people. Unfortunately, that approach still means that it's their fault, but we are more human and we will help them. The second model is the model we approach in Ireland. It's the social inclusion model. And in fact, there's a social inclusion section in the Department of Health, or the HSE, a section I work with a lot. I found them a fantastic group of people. But social inclusion, what does it actually mean? Social inclusion means that we want to include everybody in society, so we will give them access to the basic services. Everyone has a right to education, everyone has a right to health. However, that doesn't mean that everyone has an equal right to health, or an equitable right to health, or an equitable right to education. And it gets even worse, because it means that you just give, we actually see our system, it actually classically captures this. Everyone gets access to free healthcare, but if you're in the public system, it's a terrible system, whereas if you have the private system, you have a really good system. And it's the same in education. Private schools mean that you're still guaranteed the right to education, but you get a much better education in the private schools. So, there's 2 problems with this. First of all, is that actually by taking people, having a 2-tiered system, not only does it not recognise the right to equality, but it pulls the middle classes from the public system. And Maeve Ann Wren made that point, that if you pull the actual middle classes from the public system, they're the people who give out and achieve change. So you make the public system even worse. But the second point is, we actually know that if you have the actual model, social inclusion model, doesn't achieve good health statistics as the third model, which is the redistributive model. And the redistributive model you find in places like the Nordic countries and Sweden, etc., as well as in places like Canada who adopt a more redistributive model. So you redistribute wealth. It's not about having equality, access to just basic care, it's about having equal care, equal access to care in all aspects of your social and cultural and health rights. And that's the model I would want to see. So when we look at the right to health, it's the right to health to have equitable health, where we equally distribute that health resources and access to our rights to cultural resources as well as health resources. And in terms of this, what does this actually mean on the ground? I'm going to talk about where I come from. Where I come from is, basically, in terms of policies, there's 2 areas. I mean, obviously there's legislation, but there's also, again, we talked earlier on, Siobhan mentioned, there was the idea of prioritisation. I work for the HSE, and the HSE decides to prioritise things, or not. Very interestingly, back in the late 1990s, Tony Blair's government took health inequalities, as they call it inequalities, and they prioritised it. And health inequalities became a significant trigger for change in the UK. Everybody knew what it was, all applications had to include it, and everything was proof for health inequalities. The HSE mentions health inequities or health inequalities, but it doesn't really drive change. I'll give you some examples of health inequalities. Last year I had a patient, I'll go back to the actual statistics. You know that if recently 200 people died, in a recent year 200 people died from road traffic accidents. 205 people died in the same year from cervical cancer. 500 people died from suicide in that same year, and 676 died from drug-related death. So the actual biggest killer of young people is drug-related death. Access to treatment services for drug users is extremely poor. Down the country, there's black holes where you cannot get treatment.
Thanks for presenting that picture so starkly to us, Austin, in particular in regards to life expectancy of persons who are homeless, and also bringing out really, really well that discourse of blame. And you mentioned it within the US. Unfortunately, if you look at Mary Murphy's article in the Journal today, look at the comments under that article, and unfortunately that, that PD mentality, somebody might be too young to remember PDs, that PD mentality has not left us. Why is it that those most in need of services, those most in need of support are the least likely to get it? And that's something we might come back to in the questions and the contributions. And our final contributor to the panel then is Debbie Mulhall, a community activist within Dolphin House and involved in the Community Action Network. We'll speak on housing rights. Thanks, Debbie.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. First of all, I just want to say that I'm slightly nervous, and I'm always nervous when I do stuff like this because I'm usually the one that's called upon, because I realised this morning I was never going to politics because I'm one of those people who can't say no. So that's why I'm here. So just to give you a bit of background about myself, I'm from an area called Dolphin House, and it's the largest public housing flat complex after Ballymun, and it's in Dublin South Inner City. Dolphin House is comprised of 392 units and 44 senior citizen units. We had been earmarked for regeneration in 2008, but the public-private partnership collapsed and our hopes were dashed down. The people of Dolphin House are very disappointed as they've been living with damp, mould, sewage problems for many years, decades actually. Some of them were living with them for. Some of the residents and myself, and with the guidance and support from Community Action Network, we formed Rialto Rights and Action Group around 2009. And we began to name the problems as a human rights issue. As an example, I know it's been spoken about a few times this morning, Article 11 in the Convention of the Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. It states that everyone has the right to adequate housing. A key part to the article is habitability. Took me a long time to say that word. Some of you who have heard me speak before, I know I've seen a lot of this before, will know that a starting point for us was to gather the evidence. For to do a collective complaint, you need to get out there and you need to speak to the people. And that was an easy bit for us, but you're asking people to share their life stories. And sometimes that can be very hard because, people were living with the shame and embarrassment of having these problems in their home. We also had to get experts to check out the spores in their homes, and we also found that they were very dangerous to people's health because some of the spores that was found, one of them was Aspergillus fumigatus, and that was a very dangerous spore that was found in people's homes. But when we looked at the statistics, because of the poor housing conditions, it also had a knock-on effect for people's health, and I don't just mean mental, I mean physical and mental health. It also had a knock-on effect for education. The survey showed that 40% of the people that we surveyed, children, adults, had respiratory problems. But for me, the big one, and I really got fairly angry about this, was that 92% of children had been absent from school because of these problems. And I know that the last speaker just spoke about education being so important and knowledge is power. For me, it was, I know education is so important, and because I always lived in a disadvantaged area, I was going, it's not fair, these children are going to be more disadvantaged because of the problems that they're not causing and their families are not causing. And the residents were forever trying to keep their homes mould and damp free by using lots of different detergents that they've been told to use. There was an assumption by some people that the residents in Dalton House were living here rent free, which of course is a myth. Some residents were paying over €100 a week to live in these conditions. And then added to that cost, you had to replace clothes, furniture that had been damaged because of the problems in the home. Our campaign was all about trying to get people's homes habitable and that the residents be healthy and have less stress in their lives. As of now, regeneration is happening in Dalton House, and it will take a few years for it to be completed. But we are still on Dublin City Council's back, as we know that because people will be longer waiting on the phasing, that they will also have problems living in bad conditions while they're waiting. We joined up with tenants from all over Ireland who've been living with similar problems, and between us we compiled a collective complaint which we have submitted to the Council of Europe to try and change the living conditions of some people, not only in Dublin but also in Ireland. I've been living in Dalton House all my life, and I knew that people had problems with damp and mould, but I never associated it with human rights. I knew that my family's home had had damp, mould and sewage problems. I remember seeing the mushrooms growing in the bathroom. I also remember on numerous occasions seeing human waste backing up in the toilet and spilling out onto the floor, and my father having to take duvets off the bed to wash it all up. As I said, I didn't realise that this was a human rights issue, but gradually it all started to fit into place. I learned from working with the group that we all have got rights, and yes, they were being violated. I could see people's frustration at not being heard and having to live with these problems. I knew that people shouldn't have to live in these conditions, but as I said, I didn't associate it with the human rights issue. So what am I learning about the fact we could enforce European social cultural rights? Inequality is happening on a daily basis, and it means that residents will continue to live in inadequate accommodation. People will continue to live with the problems that they have not created and they cannot fix. It's not just about people's accommodation, it's bigger than that. It's the impact of living in inadequate housing has a knock-on effect for the people's health and well-being, and it also has an effect for their children's education. It's awful to look at people who live in social housing and feel they have no rights, the shame and the embarrassment that they feel. The residents do not live in their homes rent-free, as I've already said, and their homes should be adequate accommodation. The residents have tried their best to keep their homes clean, but no matter what they do, it's only a cover-up. There's only so much washing of walls a person can do, and they cannot wash away the smells. The problems could never be solved by the residents, as the problems were structural. Residents felt there was no one listening to them. I feel it's been a long, rocky road, but I feel it will be well voted in the end. And it's not only for the people in my community, but for people nationwide. I firmly believe we would never have been regenerated in this community if we hadn't done the collective complaint. I think it still would have been on the back burner, and the people that would still be living there would be living in appalling conditions. People feel empowered, and I think this is the most important bit for us. I also believe that Dolphin House would not have been regenerated if we had not claimed our rights. I am extremely proud of my community, and for me it was important to keep our community together as much as possible. I think also that if we are successful in claiming our rights, it will give other communities the courage and empower them to do the same for their communities. People should know their rights, but most of all, they should know how to claim them. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Asking for a contribution, because, you know, when we go to conferences and speak about rights, people sometimes are very gloomy and gloomy. You have said how you spoke of power, when you spoke of politicians, use the legal mechanisms, the legal routes, as limited as they are, yeah, got a result. You know, it hasn't resolved all problems, but you know what? That is how communities can maybe get to understand. Like I was really powerful saying, you know, human rights, it's almost, sometimes we can make it feel, we can all make it feel like a very alien language, as something not for everyone. So it's making it that accessible and making people, empowering people to understand and see what their own rights are. Identify them, because they'll be the best place to identify them. So thanks to Debbie, to all the contributors for absolutely fantastic insights. It is now 1:53. We have till 2:15 for contributions. I'll ask you to keep it brief, but we do have a bit more time, so I don't have to be as strict as Anastasia had to be in the last panel. So any even slightly longer contributions, but do please just introduce yourself, any organisation you represent, and any comment or any reflection or indeed any question you have, because Jamie is also still with us, any question you may have for the panel. Eamon?
Eamon Tansey, Silent Community. Question for Dr. O'Carroll. You mentioned the three models and that we're currently kind of sandwiched in the middle. How do we transition to that distributive model, both as a society and legally speaking? What's the process, or what are the roadblocks that we need to overcome?
I actually think the problem is public consciousness. Because, I mean, for example, the idea that raising taxes is seen as such a negative thing in Ireland. The basic essence of redistribution is raising taxes. I don't know if anyone has read Thomas Piketty's book, Capital. It's brilliant, brilliant book. And he talks about how we're becoming a capitalist-based society, and you can see that. That's what's happening in the housing market. Wealth has been accumulated in capital in a few small percentage of the population. And I think you have to change that ethos. After the war, he mentions that Roosevelt applied, I think it was over 90% tax rate to people who were above a certain income in the US. So I think this idea that high taxes are bad is something that needs to be got out of the consciousness. And the idea that the high taxes are bad, but public services are bad. There's evidence that for every pound or euro of public spending you spend, your health rate goes up. And the countries with the highest public spending have the best health industry.
Yes.
I just want to comment to Austin, you were saying about, you know, knowledge is power, and like yourself, I work in HSE too, but I'm here in a voluntary capacity. But knowledge can also be really dangerous, particularly for people who know that there are alternatives out there to pathologising and medicalising distress. And sometimes people who articulate their concerns or want a different approach, you know, it actually kicks back against them. The more they try to advocate for what they want, the more it kicks back. And the longer they stay in these units, the more forcibly drugged they are. So it can be really, really dangerous. And I just want to say to Owen, I advocated for a chap in Tala, Mental Health Services, and he was really badly bullied in Dublin 24 in 2 schools. He ended up actually in Belvedere College for his last year at school. I don't know who funded that. He actually didn't get through it. But he, at one stage, presented, his mum brought him to Tala Mental Health Services. He was when she left him and came back, he had actually been told to take off his PJs, and he was put into orange theatre scrubs. It took possibly 4 or 5 years for his mother to actually get to mental health services to stop putting people periodically into these orange, Guantanamo Bay coloured scrubs. And that was one issue, and it was actually a human rights activist in Scotland, Chris Moorhead, who actually, she put up a post on Facebook and we contacted her, and she confronted Martin Rogan, who was actually very nice. He worked in HSE, he's now in mental health.
I'm going to stop here.
Okay.
Please don't mention
Sorry.
number name.
Yeah, well, it was actually been complimentary. He actually did sort it, but it took 4 to 5 years to do it. And just that chap is actually now in a hospital funded by Peter McFerry Trust, thankfully. But where does he go from there? But thankfully, at least they have given him that bridge, and to get away from being forcibly drugged and detained.
Just a quick response there. Mental health service historically has a terrible reputation from a rights perspective. And I do think you're right about knowledge of mental health. It's not known publicly, but there's a debate about what constitutes a mental health problem. And this concept of non-disease, we're creating new mental health diseases all the time. And I believe we need to help people who are suffering, but sometimes the creation of a fiction of something being there, which I think that's a dangerous use of the concept of knowledge. That's something that's a whole different debate.
But I think GPs need to get started on it, Austin, when they're not. Yeah.
And further, yes, this gentleman, Tommy Conley, School of Law in Limerick. Debbie, just very interested in your talk. It's quite an original approach, I think, that was taken in Rialto, using a rights-based approach. And I think, as the chair mentioned, sometimes the language of human rights has been quite inaccessible to a lot of people. I've done a lot of work at the community level myself, and you very seldom hear people talking about human rights organisations or legislation, etc. So, what was the challenge in terms of introducing this type of approach at a local level, and how was it received by local people, and how did you overcome that?
Yeah, I agree with you, definitely. And my famous quote was, the only right I've ever heard was the right to remain silent. All I ever heard was that, and I genuinely mean that. And I wasn't from personal experience of watching it. But basically for us, I think you're right, that was one of the big barriers. People were afraid of the language, and I think that's a big major barrier. And that's why I was saying about education, and I've said this since I started learning about it. If people are learning at a early age, and I've said this, like at school age, if you learn about their rights, their human rights, and make the language accessible. Because for us, it was like, we were going to article, what does that mean? And thankfully we had an organisation like Community Action Network who helped us immensely, But I find with myself now, I would use it a lot now, and I can associate it with a lot of stuff. And I come back to Jane to talk to someone new about this stuff around children, and that the single mothers having to walk, and at 7 years of age they go back to work. I'm on a community employment, people walk, and I've seen it firsthand down women, and I've said that if the children of all them mothers has to go back to work, right? That's what the government is telling me, or the money's coming down. If all those children just decided to, hey, let's bring child out because our parents left us at home because we had to go to work, there'd be millions of children bringing child on, you know what I mean? But it's their human rights being violated as well. So if younger people start to know, and human rights became more accessible, it'd be much easier for everybody, and for us to start claiming the rights. But it is important to learn about them.
Mary Cosgrove, anyway, just a quick comment. Debbie, you said you'd say no to politics, and that's a loss. Siobhan, you mentioned traveller education, and mentioned by a few speakers, those needing services least provided. We saw the recent strategy for education. I think travellers get mentioned twice, and one is a really, really, really low target for like 20 students in third level or whatever. Can you speak to any, I suppose, discussions with the Department of Education on that? Are they amenable to, again, using that
think to say across departments they've been very resistant to any discussion of human rights. The Department of Education, in relation to travellers and implementation of traveller policy, have been, I think, one of the poorest. There is a report that was supposed to be developed into the strategy that was never developed, but actually I was trying to rush through the presentation so much. I did want to make a point. I was only talking about, I was looking at a few areas in traveller-specific policy, and of course mainstream policy is a huge discussion as well, where it's not enough we need to have targeted measures, but also across the mainstream measures. So the short answer is I think no, I think they've been extremely resistant to a human rights-based approach, and that's possibly why the constitutionalisation offers another kind of piece of leverage. I think not just in terms of potential education, but in hopefully creating the groundwork or the impetus on policy makers and legislators to actually use human rights-based approaches or that lens in developing policy. But at the moment, the situation is not good.
Yeah, thank you, Lily. Martin Collins, Paddy Point, Traveller and Roma Centre. Just to pick up on a point that Debbie made earlier on and didn't come back to the question around travellers' access to education. I think language is quite important, and how issues get named and identified and framed is absolutely crucial. Because I know on my own journey and travellers more generally, consciousness raising and being politicised only took place in my community, I would say maybe from the mid-80s onwards. And we learned a language to describe an experience that we have endured for centuries and still endure to this very day. And that is, for example, words like, or terms like racism, discrimination, the right to one's identity, the whole concept of ethnicity and cultural rights. That was a language that we were not au fait. It was completely alien to us as a community. And we only acquired that language, I would say in the mid-80s, to describe our experience on the island of Ireland. And that's a great source of empowerment. And it gives you the capacity to understand, reflect and articulate, and then to advocate and lobby and campaign for policy and legislative change. And then, as Station said earlier on, after almost 35 years of hard slogging and a dogged campaign, we managed to get this state to recognise what is self-evident, and that is that my community are a distinct ethnic minority. But that took patience and persistence, but it also took language, and language is quite important, and it can be really powerful, in terms of people's emancipation. Go back to education. People might recall, I think it was only about 2 years ago, there was a young traveller boy in Clonmel in Tipperary, a young Stokes boy, who wanted to access second-level education, having completed primary. And the school had a criterion, a past pupil criterion, or else one of your parents must have had gone to that school. Now, his parents were of a generation that the percentage of travellers going to secondary education was almost zilch. They were my age, actually, 50-odd-ish. And he was the oldest in the family, so he had no older sibling. So the criterion had a disproportionate, discriminatory impact on that young boy who wanted to access education. And it went all the way right to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court actually, in my opinion, a layperson's opinion, I'm not a lawyer, actually institutionalised a racist policy. They found it okay and that was compatible with policy and law and the European Convention on Human Rights. But quite clearly we have a different opinion. But here was a young traveller boy who wanted to access higher education, despite the myth or the perception that travellers are not interested in education, and in particular higher education. And it is only a myth, it is totally untrue. But yet this young boy was prevented by the highest court in the land of accessing a place in secondary school. So not only can you use the legal system to vindicate your rights, but there are times when the legal system actually can shut down your rights, as it did in this particular case.
Thanks, Martin. Any comments from anyone on the panel on that?
I think there's a really fascinating issue about identity in the context of economic, social and cultural rights. I don't have anywhere near a well-established opinion on this. I'm just really interested in what everybody else thinks. But in the context of, at least in the UK Brexit, and in the context of Trump, there's this narrative being told that in some way identity-based politics has played into the hands of those who want to see a different type of society. And it's this idea that we've somehow overlooked the interest interest of white males who can't access the sorts of services they would be able to access were they one of these previously identified discriminating against groups. Which sounds like a completely ridiculous notion. I'm sure it is. But on the other hand, you start to realise that should we be talking about the people who are persistently disadvantaged on socio-economic terms as a distinct group who need to be the subject of some kind of positive kind of discrimination in order to end the legacy of poverty? And if we did do that, would that be inconsistent with the gains we've already made in terms of trying to alleviate discrimination based on other protected characteristics? Or would it be a sensible move to try and identify, if you like, poverty as a structural issue and not any longer allowing people to categorise it as a behavioural-based issue, which I think the stigma attached to that is one of the big features that comes out from these presentations. I'd be really interested in what other people think about that as an idea. In the UK, just to finish, we did have at one point this idea that we would have as a protected characteristic basically socio-economic disadvantage, which would be a group something could associate themselves with, and by doing so say, I'm a victim of historical disadvantage too. But it never made its way into the statute, but it's incredibly controversial provision. So I just wondered what people on the panel or the people in the audience thought about that. It's something I wonder about, how I feel about what I actually think.
Can I just react on this? Yeah, my name is Pierre Klein. I'm French, but I'm working here for Altogether in Dignity Island. So in the UK, it would be known as ITD Force World. And in a certain way, what I understand about the origin of this organization, which is now working on human rights issues in 40 countries, is about what Joseph Brzezinski, who created the organization, called the Force World. And it's exactly the people you were trying to categorize here. So people who have been in their country condemned to poverty for generation and generation, who really don't access to most of the economic, social, cultural, but also citizens and liberty rights. So I don't know if it's good, because each time you try to focus and to categorize people, you have the risk of shaming them. But he named this the Force World, and in an activist way, to say we are from the Force World and we are going to change things. But for us, it's a question, so I would be very interested to think about it.
I'll take one or two questions, but before that, I do want to give Siobhan just a chance to respond to some of the questions.
Well, just to add a point, I suppose, in terms of, I think the point that Martin was making about the Supreme Court and their decision, and that the courts, the justice system is not a neutral system that's benevolent or in any way it embodies the racism of every other institution. And I think some of the comments by judges recently really show this. So, for example, you had a judge who referred to travellers as Neanderthal men, and you also had a judge who, in relation to a case with a Roma man, said, I presume he's doing what all of them tend to do, use the streets here to beg. And these were, neither of these judges were held to account, but they're making explicitly racist comments in the courtroom. So I suppose it's just, there's a whole other piece in relation to this around judges' accountability, of course, as well. And just in relation to the idea around kind of discrimination and historical discrimination, I think it's a really interesting discussion. The point I think is important is that in the general comment on non-discrimination, historical discrimination is talked about, and maybe that could be used as a basis. But I think importantly, any progression in terms of human rights in the courts should look at intersectional discrimination, and I think that's something the courts haven't really good at, and perhaps that's where the development needs to happen.
Thanks, Arnold.
Yeah, thanks. Just to follow up on something Jamie mentioned there, the UN Special Rapporteur on the right to adequate housing does draw or places specific attention on people who are experiencing homelessness, and the fact that there has been this social construct of a group called the homeless. And from her point of view, she's saying, well, actually, these are people that are experiencing a double discrimination because they're being stigmatized and essentially criminalized. I'm a big fan in my other policy area of criminology, and labelling theory for me holds a lot of weight. So I can understand why we might want to obviously challenge the social constructs, but it would be, for me, it would be a worry to start trying to suggest that there are a subgroup and the subgroup are their own, or one subgroup are their own.
Yes.
So.
Austin?
I mean, the exact same point. Medicine has been using labels for years, and a lot of, I think it's really interesting in medicine because the problem is the same position with stigma. A lot of the labels are socially constructed or medical constructions. We were talking about mental health. I mean, I and my family and someone who's given the diagnosis of ADHD. And I quite happily said, actually, I don't believe it's such a thing. And they said, well, that's a pity because there's lots of services with it. I said, well, I'll take it then. I think the thing is sometimes, I think that's what we forget, is that sometimes identifying a group is a way of targeting action. And we forget that it's a way of targeting action, we start thinking that it's something in itself, and that's where the stigma comes. So I do think labels are very useful to be able to target action, as long as we fight against the notion that it means anything else than that.
We have two final contributions, as brief as possible, please, and then because I am closing the panel in 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Reid O'Brien, Irish National Organisation of Employed. Just picking up on Jamie's point, in this very room not so long ago, the Equality Rights Alliance published a report on socioeconomic status. It's the ground that missing out for equality legislation. It means the group that has no reported second rate of discrimination in the Central Statistics Office Equality Report. Unemployed people cannot address that discrimination unless they were also discriminated against because of another ground. So it is an important ground. Our housing crisis, our health inequalities, class is at the heart of the movement of that. We don't name it in this society and we have failed to address it. And it means that we haven't incorporated all of the grounds noted in Article 2.2 unless we develop a social origin or socioeconomic status fund.
And then final contribution to living with the classes, and I apologise for cutting anyone out of the debate, but
Valerie McFarlane, I work for Longford.
Valerie
McFarlane, I work for Longford Community Resources, local development. Okay. Valerie McFarlane, I work for Longford Community Resources Local Development Company, and I'm a community development worker. And I just wanted to emphasise the importance of community development in terms of seeking and achieving economic and social cultural rights has been demonstrated by the likes of Pavy Point in terms of building people's capacity to claim their rights and hold duty bearers to account. So I just want to flag community work is vitally important if we're talking about fighting for rights and achieving rights for people.
That's just me. I do have to finish. I have to run. But can I just thank everyone in the on the panel, Austin, Debbie, Owen, Siobhan, for absolutely wonderful contributions and giving us so much to think about. For Debbie in terms of being more aware that people can be disengaged by the language of rights, but we can re-engage people and show them how rights can be utilised. And a point about class, and not even use the word class without being scratched out, saying change that to socioeconomic ground. Working in university, we're not allowed to use the C word, the class word. It has to be always socioeconomic disadvantage, which is just hiding people's uncomfortableness with class. But thanks to all our panelists, and thanks to the audience for your contribution.